योग केवल शरीर के लिए नहीं है। शरीर के लिए तो अपने आप स्वाभाविक रूप से लाभ मिलता ही है। योग का जो मुख्य लक्ष्य है कि हम समाधि को प्राप्त कर जाएं। सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः तुरंत नहीं आता। सर्वे बाय द साधना।
Although yoga appears to focus on controlling the body, it is in fact an ancient spiritual discipline, a form of meditation, harnessing the energies of the body to tame the mind. Some yogis learn to sit without moving for hours, breathing more and more slowly until they seem to be barely breathing at all. Om Shahana Vavatu Sarve Bhavantu Sukhina.
All kinds of trance states are possible through meditation. If you hold the mind, if you concentrate the mind on a single object, be it a word or a candle flame or a sound, it's possible to transport the mind into all kinds of interesting places. The person who was to become the Buddha was very good at all of those practices. He was a super student, doing these practices, taking them to their limit, and no matter what he did in these practices, he was still stuck in the pain that he set out with.
He ascends to these very rarefied states of consciousness, but it's not permanent. And it does not bring penetrating truth into the nature of reality. So these become a temporary escape from the problem of existence, but they don't solve the problem.
Siddhartha apprenticed himself to another popular guru, but the results were the same. The thought occurred to me, he said later, this practice does not lead to direct knowledge, to deeper awareness. Disenchanted, he left this master too. Siddhartha continued to drift south, still searching for the answer to his questions. Why do human beings suffer? Is there any escape?
He's trying and trying and searching, and he already experienced extreme luxury, so now he tries extreme deprivation.
Among the renunciants, asceticism was a common spiritual practice, punishing the body as a way to attain serenity and wisdom. Siddhartha fell in with 5 other ascetics, and soon was outdoing them in mortifying the flesh, subjecting his body to extremes of hardship and pain.
The body represents a fundamental problem. Old age brings a decrepitude to the body. Sickness brings pain and suffering to the body, and death is ultimately the cessation of the functioning of the body. So there was a sense that if you could punish the body sufficiently, you could escape its influence. You could transcend some of the limitations that the body seemed to impose.
The ascetic pursues the truth by taking the requirements of survival down to the absolute minimum possible. Barely enough food to stay alive, no protection from the elements, no heat. Sit in the cold, sit in the rain. Meditate fiercely for all the hours of awakening.
The step of renunciation, of shedding everything, of dying, the feeling that one is dying to one's life as it was, is essential to being reborn as someone who sees.
Ascetics can still be seen in India, firm in the belief that by subduing the flesh, they can gain spiritual power.
सत्य क्या है? एक टाइम भोजन लेने में 24 घंटे में एक सेकंड अपने को प्रत्यक्ष बता देता है कि सत्य क्या है. था छोड़ दिया 16 उम्र में. इसलिए सोचता हूँ कि हर चीज मोह नहीं रखता. ये मार्ग से ये मार्ग जो आगे बढ़ने के लिए इसमें मैं मोह नहीं रखता. मोह
Emaciated, exhausted, Siddhartha punished himself for 6 years, trying to put an end to the cravings that beset him.
He tortures himself, trying to destroy anything within himself that he sees as bad. The spiritual traditions of that time said you can be liberated if you eliminate everything that's human, everything that's coarse and vulgar, every bit of anger, every bit of desire. If you wipe that out with force of will, then you can go into some kind of transcendental state. And the Buddha tried all that, and he became, the most anorectic of the anorectic ascetics. He was eating 1 grain of rice per day. He was drinking his own urine. He was standing on 1 foot. He was sleeping on nails. He did it all to the utmost.
My body slowly became extremely emaciated, Siddhartha said. My limbs became like the jointed segments of vine or bamboo stems. My spine stood out like a string of beads. My ribs jutted out like the jutting rafters of an old abandoned building. The gleam of my eyes appeared to be sunk deep in my eye sockets, like the gleam of water deep in a well. My scalp shriveled and withered like a green bitter gourd, shriveled and withered in the heat and wind.
What he was trying to do was pushing his body to the most extreme that he could. But then he realized that from that, he cannot gain what he wants. Trying to torture the body becomes too much. The whole attention is given to the body, nothing else.
He surrendered himself completely to the hard training that he was given. And what he discovered, having tried this completely for many years, was that he had not answered his question. It hadn't worked. He was on the verge of death, dying, unawakened, when he remembered something. He remembered a day when he was young and sat by the river with his father, and the perfection of the world as it was simply gave itself to him.
Years before, when Siddhartha was a small boy, his father, the king, had taken him to a spring planting festival. While he watched the ceremonial dancing, he looked down at the grass. He thought about the insects and their eggs, destroyed as the field was planted. He was overwhelmed with sadness.
One great taproot of Buddhism is compassion, which is the deep affection that we feel for everything because we're all in it together, be it other human beings, other animals, the planet as a whole, the creatures of this planet, the trees and rivers of this planet. Everything is connected.
It was a beautiful day. His mind drifted. As if by instinct, he crossed his legs in the yoga pose of meditation. And the natural world paid him homage. As the sun moved through the sky, the shadows shifted. But the shadow of the rose apple tree where he sat remained still. He felt a sense of pure joy.
The joy that he found is in the world that is already broken. It's in this transitory world that we're all a part of. And the fabric of this world, despite the fact that it can seem so horrible, the underlying fabric of this world actually is that joy that he recovered. That was his great insight. But, he says, I can't sustain a feeling of joy like this if I don't take any food, so I better eat something. And then at that moment, a village maiden mysteriously appears carrying a bowl of rice porridge.
And she said to him, "Here, eat." That moment of generosity and release, when he accepted the rice, was a decision towards life. It was what in the Christian tradition might be called grace, that you cannot do it completely on your own. And in Christianity, the grace comes from the divine. In the story of the Buddha, the grace comes from the ordinary kind heart of a girl who sees somebody starving and says, "Eat."
There's something beautiful. Whenever I remember that story, it makes me so happy because I see the heart of Buddha as the person he was, like the Siddhartha. This dish was the dish he used to be fed by his stepmother, rice pudding. He was missing that so much. And then he remembered maybe further and further, and he remembered about his wife, about his son, and the deepest emotions that he had suppressed. They overpowered. They came up. They were still there. He had a feeling of missing. He had a feeling of seeing his son, and a feeling of being near his loved ones. They were so powerful. Oh, this must have soaked his whole entire being.
He was actually an utter failure. He had been clinging to the path of asceticism, and when he took the food, what followed was a return of his original question. Life is painful